The Voivodate of Transylvania was an autonomous region in the realm of Saint Stephen considered to be a part of the Kingdom of Hungary. Its autonomous status was preserved because of its geography and diverse population. It was also the silver mining center of the realm. The estates of Transylvania were internally divided between three so-called nations: the Saxon burghers in the cities, the Transylvanian nobility, and the Shekel warriors. The Shekels lived in the eastern Transylvanian border region and preserved their special status by acting as border guards. They also formally had their own representative at the royal court, the Count of the Shekels, although most of the time it was just an additional position given to the current Voivode of Transylvania. Within their own group, the Shekels considered themselves traditionally equal to each other. That is until the growing economic disparity became very evident in the 1460s. Richer Shekels were buying land off of poorer Shekels and turning them into their peasants or serfs. Rich Saxons and rich Transylvanian nobles also engaged in similar practices within their own nations and in areas where the nation's territories overlapped. Seeing this happen, a lot of the Shekels demanded protections of their traditional rights and of the equal status within their own nation. This came in the form of a Charter of Liberties issued by the King and the Diet of Transylvania in 1466. Things fell apart the very next year when the Estates of Transylvania declared a revolt against King Matthias because of the new taxation system. The revolt was also encouraged by Prince Stephen III the Great of Moldavia. Part of the rebelling estates was also motivated by 3 generations of resentment towards the Hunyadi clan. They considered them upstarts and outsiders who came out of nowhere to undeservedly dominate Transylvania, and Matthias's father and uncle had a history of local conflicts. Part of this was also the suspicion that Matthias's grandfather was a likely convert to Catholicism from Eastern Orthodoxy, and even after 3 Catholic generations, some in Transylvania considered the Hunyadis to be schismatics. When the estates declared their revolt, they elected their current 3 joint voivodes as leaders, but before they could assemble the Transylvanian armies, Matthias's army showed up and captured them. A lot of the rebels ran away and the voivodes begged the king for mercy. Matthias spent a good part of 1467 sitting in judgment over rebels in Transylvania. Many, like the voivodes, were punished with land confiscations, while other rebel leaders were sentenced to brutal executions. Matthias then marched against Prince Stephen of Moldavia, but because of a campaign of attrition he was forced to withdraw. With the confiscated Transylvanian land, Matthias attempted to create a new and loyal Transylvanian aristocracy, but this partially backfired as some of the newly created families went extinct very quickly, and Matthias, in a move of reconciliation, gave the land back to the original owners. Matthias also employed divide and rule policies to split the 3 nations from each other and cause internal divisions. The king granted the Saxon burghers extensive privileges. He created for them a count of the Saxons at court. They were given rights to effectively discriminate and exclude members of the other 2 nations from Saxon institutions, and allowed the Saxons to rule over members of the other 2 nations on Saxon land. In 1473, Matthias issued a decree which stratified the Shekel warriors by wealth, recognizing the actual state of affairs on the ground rather than a traditional ideal of equality. The top class were Shekels who could equip their own soldiers, the next were those who could afford to serve as cavalry, then those who could afford to serve as infantry, and then those who could afford to be peasants or serfs. Matthias was not the only one dealing with an eruption of internal unrest. At the same time, his former father-in-law, the Hussite king George Podebrady, was facing growing and vocal opposition from his Catholic estates. Podebrady had tried to deal with the Catholic opposition by pushing back against extreme Hussites and by appealing to the papacy to tell his Catholic subjects to abide by the confessional compacts that ended the Hussite wars 30 years ago. The appeal to the papacy proved to be catastrophic, as the popes reminded Podebrady that the papacy never approved the compacts in the first place. To make things worse, relations with Emperor Frederick III were also deteriorating. In a desperate move to save his throne, Podebrady pushed a diplomatic initiative for a general European peace or alliance where everybody in Christendom agrees to not attack each other. This idea appealed to Universalist Catholic, Humanist and anti-Ottoman circles, but it was an idea proposed by a heretic in a very desperate situation. In 1466, Pope Paul II gave the final push to the Catholic estates in Bohemia by declaring Podebrady dethroned and calling for a crusade to liberate Bohemia from a heretic king. In 1467, the Catholic estates of Bohemia rose up in revolt and gathered to elect a new Catholic king. Their first choice was Casimir IV of Poland, but he refused. Apparently, Podebrady had brokered a deal with him, naming Casimir's son Vladislav as his heir. The Catholic estate's next choice was the Margrave of Brandenburg, who also refused. And then finally they offered the throne of Bohemia to King Matthias of the realm of St. Stephen, who the Pope was strongly suggesting was the right choice from the start. Matthias, of course, accepted, but the hesitation in offering Matthias the crown was due to his developing absolutist tendencies in his own realm. Any bond that did exist between Matthias and Podebrady was already broken when Queen Catherine Podebrady died in 1464, and Matthias may have played some part in encouraging the papacy to trigger the events in Bohemia. Matthias had already given up on the grand anti-Ottoman alliance, and he lacked the money to finance his war machine to fight the Ottomans on his own. He also needed money to secure his rule at home. Acquiring Bohemia could go a long way in securing new revenues. Bohemia was safe from Ottoman raids. It had lucrative farmlands and mines, but most importantly, it had developed urban areas. By some estimates, Prague had a population that numbered around half of the whole urban population of the realm of St. Stephen. The crown of Bohemia, that is to say the prince-electorship of Bohemia, could also bring Matthias closer to a potential grander prize, the imperial throne and the potential imperial revenues. And a war against the common enemy and military victories could also unite the realm behind Matthias. So in 1468, in the words of Bonfini, in order to rule in peace, Matthias made war abroad. Internally, there were objections to this drastic change of direction northwards, but Matthias justified his actions by equating the interests of the crown with the interests of the realm and of Christendom. He said that for the sake of Christendom, he would fight both the Bohemian heretics and the Ottoman infidels.